Welcome. My name is Julian Harper, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here with two of my co-hosts. First of all, Noel Leader.
Peace.
Second of all, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And this is a live program. And first of all, let me welcome our Free Speech TV community. Starting Sunday, I believe, at 11 a.m., we're going to be aired on Free Speech Television, so you'll have an opportunity to watch us there. Now, people on Free Speech or who's watching us via Free Speech Television understand this is a recorded show for you guys. It's a live show today, but it's a recorded show for you. And you can have an opportunity to call in and watch us live on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock on mnn.org, or you can send some of your messages or questions on Facebook. All right? Listen, okay. As usual, in about 25 minutes, you guys will have an opportunity to call in. It's a live program. So call in, talk about some of the questions we talk about or topics we talk about or some questions you may have on your own. But as usual, we're going to start with our historical piece. Michael Graves, I know we have two topics that you wanted to talk about.
Well, real quickly, this is the anniversary of the passing of the great William Augustus Jones, and while he has a birthday a few weeks from now, we would mention it now so we have the time. And certainly William Augustus Jones, one of the greatest preachers we've ever produced, not only for his progressive ministry in the pulpit, but certainly the way he carried himself as a man and as an activist. He had no equal. William Augustus Jones is one of the greatest preachers we ever produced. Just to see him in the community in Bedford-Stuyvesant, just to see him as he just moved throughout. I'll never forget some of the things that he's noted for saying. You know, he once said that before he dropped his arms, he would sell peanuts on a corner, and he talked about when the trumpet is necessary, a flute is not sufficient. And he went on to say the famous thing that everybody knows him for when he said, don't eat the king's meat. And that's one thing that our leaders have failed to be able to do, and that's to stay away from the king's meat, because once you eat the king's meat, now you have to do the king's bidding. And so he used that biblical text about restraining from the king's meat because it's only right, and that's how you were supposed to operate without any strings attached. So great man, what a man, big booming voice, great man, physical stature. William Augustus Jones, nobody quite like him.
And Mike, also, this is the anniversary of the killing of Amadou Diallo.
Well, yeah, I was at the dinner this past Saturday night for Amadou Diallo, and certainly you had a lot of people there. It was sort of a who's who of sorts. You know, all the elected officials, especially the Harlem ones, they were all there. And unfortunately, all they did the entire evening was they patted each other on the back and talked about how great they all are. And everybody from Dinkins and Keith Wright and former Mayor Dinkins and Dickens, who's now, I think, she's an assembly person now. She was a city council person. And you had Reverend Sharpton and others there. And to see these elected officials just patting each other on the back, not doing anything, it's very unfortunate that they didn't even mention the 41 shots and how unarmed black man, hardworking, was killed unjustly, and that none of the perpetrators of this saw a day in jail. They had a mock trial of sorts upstate New York where I went to that. I'll never forget seeing Sean, what's his name? Sean Carroll. Sean Carroll claiming that he saw Amadou Diallo, I'll never forget these words, slinking and peering. I don't know what slinking is, and I don't have a full understanding of what peering is and how that violates the law. But standing in front of his door, he said he was slinking and peering, and as they approached the doorway, and he pulled out his weapon. He said as he dislodged rounds at Amadou Diallo, he saw a gun flash coming right back at him at that exact moment. And then he had the temerity, after emptying his weapon into Amadou Diallo, he claimed after everybody shot all 41 rounds that he grabbed Amadou Diallo and said, "Don't die, don't die." You know, what a devil. You know, it was just disgusting to see that. So it just brings back those memories. But I'll just say one thing. I will respect the words of Reverend Sharpton, that he lifted up Amadou Diallo's mother, Katiatou Diallo, by saying that she was a courageous woman. And he gave 100 blacks in law enforcement credit for being a part of that struggle. So I thank Reverend Sharpton for his kind words, but unfortunately the elected officials that night were just patting each other on the back. Rango all of them.
All right. No.
All right, real quick, I also like to echo what Julian said. Welcome our Free Speech TV audience, as well as our normal Manhattan Neighborhood Network and New York City audience. But for those who don't remember, Amadou Diallo was the individual, as Michael stated, who was murdered by members of the New York City Police Department while he was going home from a hard day of work in the AM. 4 officers from the plainclothes street crime unit, pounced on him for no apparent reason. They claimed he fit the description, of course, which is the normal. But there was one of the most horrific events in New York City Police Department history. The movement, No Justice, No Peace movement, was a farce because over 1,000 people voluntarily got arrested, but none of the officers, I'm talking about community people, but none of the officers involved in this horrific murder was ever convicted for shooting him over 41 times. So it's something that we should always remember. And, Amadou Diallo.
Yeah, and I had an opportunity to go to that crime scene because I was part of the team that did the investigation, or part of the investigation. And it was a horrific crime scene. I mean, to see the number of rounds that were shot into that hallway and the blood, and it was just horrific. And it's very unfortunate that, in my assessment, the investigation and the trial was really not a true depiction of what we want justice to be.
Right.
I'm sorry, no.
I just wanted to finally say, I was trying to think of this, that one of the officers involved in that, Officer Boss, was promoted by this administration to the rank of sergeant, which is unbelievable. That, this mayor, de Blasio, so-called progressive, so-called liberal, would promote an individual involved in one of the most horrific murders in police department history to the rank of sergeant.
Right. And, again, as Noel stated, it was definitely horrific. As Mike talked about, this is Black History Month, and Noel's president, who he's just so proud of, Donald Trump, held a meeting honoring Black History Month, which he called a listening session, where the majority of the people, if not all the people there, were Donald Trump supporters, and they talked about how they admired him and what a great job that they felt that he was going to do and the support that they had for him, which had nothing to do, at least the time that I've viewed it, talking about Black history. Mike, I know, and I have some more things to say, but I know that you wanted to say something about that particular session that your president held. Yeah,
well, at that, on the one hand, it's good to acknowledge Black History Month. However, when you have, he had his number one guy, is Pastor Darrell Scott, Ben Carson, Omarosa Manigault, Armstrong Williams, Cedric Richmond, who's the chairperson of the Congressional Black Caucus. They were all there, and they exchanged pleasantries, and he talked about Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and Frederick Douglass. And somebody probably needed to remind the president that Frederick Douglass has long been passed, well over 120-something or 30-something years. He's been going. I mean, I guess the president didn't know that, and he was talking about how popular Frederick Douglass is getting, as if Frederick Douglass is a contemporary of ours. And certainly he was off base when he said that. And I'll just say also about that, Pastor Scott also intimated that he spoke to Chicago gang leaders, and that the gang leaders have a lot of respect for President Trump, and that they were willing to lower the body count. They would have to negotiate, and it would have to involve federal funding, and they would lower the body count in Chicago. They guarantee it, which was fake. It was a farce. This is just Pastor Scott. Should be ashamed of himself. He's from Ohio, by the way. He was the one that brought in Jim Brown and Ray Lewis, and they should be ashamed of themselves for doing things like that, because the blood that's running in Chicago is not cheap, and we should not trivialize these things and then just to soup up these photo ops for President Trump.
Now, Noel, and I know you have something you wanted to say, but very quickly, talking about Pastor Scott, when he did make that statement to Donald Trump's response was, if they're not, meaning the gang members in Chicago, if they're not going to solve the problem, we will, meaning that the federal government is going to solve the problem. And that was a very aggressive response, the way he put it out to the pastor and the world, saying that if the members of the Chicago gangs don't lower the body count, as Mike said and as the president said, that he's going to make sure that the government does. Your thoughts on that? Well,
the government should really be involved in any a problem that any community, all of us are citizens. I know he meant it in a different way,
right.
That he wasn't going to get to the crust and crest of the cause of the violence, which is poverty, miseducation, the housing situation, et cetera. Most of it is around social conditions. But this is typical Donald Trump. As Michael stated, I don't believe that some of the utterance that was stated by the clergy was really genuinely stated from the gang members. But, we all have a responsibility to address, including the government, members of our community, the clergy, et cetera, have a responsibility to address any social conditions that are negative that exist in any community in this country. But I understand how Donald Trump meant it. He meant more so of the militarization of the police department to invade that community in a militaristic fashion, making arrests and who knows what else, as opposed to getting at the core of the crime problem that they do have in Chicago.
Absolutely. And we have to remember that this aggressive stance that Donald Trump is taking, plans to take, and may take, is going to have a very negative effect on our community. As you stated, a lot of these issues are social issues that need to be addressed, but no one's talking about
exactly.
them. So.
And his response is, as most mayors and most governors responds to any issue that exists in our community, is arrest, summonses, et cetera, as opposed to, as we all stated, getting to the core of the issue.
I'm glad you said in our community.
Right.
Also, Milo Yiannopoulos, a white supremacist, tried to speak at Berkeley College recently, and I know you wanted to talk about that, Mike.
Well, sure. The University of California at Berkeley, he was invited by someone to speak. Now, he's a white supremacist of the highest order. He's associated with Breitbart, and Breitbart, was run by Bannon, the chief counsel to the president. He ran it before this new position that he has now in the Trump administration. And this guy, not only is he a white supremacist, he's a gay conservative. And he's been making negative statements all over, as does Richard Spencer and many others. They're getting real popular now. And because the college at Berkeley that has a long history of struggle and protest, because they protested him being there and he wasn't able to speak last week, President Trump threatened to pull the funding out of the University of California at Berkeley. Believe it or not, that's a state institution. And because one of his colleagues was not able to speak, a white supremacist, it's like a Klansman not being able to speak somewhere, and now you say you're going to withdraw funding from that university. This is a president that's totally out of order, and I think that somebody needs to get the impeachment papers ready.
Wow. Now, we understand that this is Black History Month, and we understand that it's not just the history of African people does not solely exist within these 28, sometimes 29 days, and it doesn't solely exist on the or in the way or fashion that is being presented by white media. Noel, I know this is something that really touches your heart.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, the origin of Black History Month was created by, as many of you know, Carter G. Woolson, who's the father of the Black History Month. And in 1915, he founded the Journal of Negro History. And in 1926, he launched the Negro History Week, what, since that time expanded to a month. But his intentions for Black History Month was more than just the civil rights era or individuals who've been involved in the civil rights era, which we know is very significant and very important. But what I get burdened of over time, every time, whether it's the white media or white newspapers or the educational system, when they talk about Black History Month, it's limited to the era of the 60s, the 70s. Black history expands thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, Carter G. Woolson, because when he created the Black History Week, it was in 1926, he could not have been only talking about the civil rights era, which didn't happen as of yet. His motivation for developing, creating Black History Week, which expanded to the month, was that African history needed to be taught not only to members of the African American communities, but the communities all across the country, because there was a lack of information about the contributions, and it still is, of African Americans to world history. John Henry Clark one time said that history is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. And if we don't know about our history, we can't find ourselves in the map of human geography. History tells the people where they have been and what they have been, where they are and what they are. Most important, history tells the people what they still must go and what they still must be. The relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to a child. So when our community is denied, and communities in general are denied an appropriate history, a true history of African Americans and world history, this finding themselves is totally impossible. And when people have these notions about the lack of ingenuity, creativity, of inventions or creations of African people, when they don't know this history, they feel that that's an appropriate and accurate statement when we know it's not. I mean, for example, Africans had the Holy Bible before, the Jews and the Christians had a book. They had a Holy Script, the Book of Life. They had the Ten Commandments. We had the post and lintel system, which most buildings today are erected on, when you build a heavy structure and it goes up. We had astronomy, mathematics, science, et cetera, et cetera. Imhotep is the father of medical history. But when this information is not talked about in African History Month, and the only conversation is limited to the civil rights movement and civil rights personalities, which they deserve to be spoken of, but we need a broader discussion about what is truly African history.
Now, and thank you, Noel. And part of the problem is that someone else is telling our story. They're deciding what's important in an African community, in the spirits of African people, and what we've done in history. And when they have the opportunity to modify, to change, to adjust, to corrupt, to distract, and even add sometimes information and misinformation to what Africans have contributed to this country and globally, it taints what's being fed into our children. And we also have to understand that these things have a psychological effect on our kids.
Exactly.
How they view themselves, how they view each other, how they respond to themselves, and how they respond to others. So it's very important, the information that you just stated, that we understand that we have to control the conversation, the information that's being disseminated when we talk about the contributions of African people, not just in this nation, but globally. Did you want to?
Sure, and want to commend you, Noel, for that presentation of Carter G. Woodson. I would just add to that one thing when you mentioned the Ten Commandments. If you want to see the Ten Commandments long before Moses presented it, just go into Ma'at, the ancient records, and you'll see the 42 negative confessions on the walls inside the pyramids long before there was a Moses, well over 1,200 years before there was any person named Moses, if that person existed.
Oh, so this is not a rumor. You can actually see it.
You can see it.
Okay.
You can see it. It's there and it's documented. So they didn't come from that book. That those 10 came out of 42. So, and that's documented history. Even a European historian wouldn't even argue with that. Maybe a white person digging a ditch, but not historians. They know. My contribution to Black History Month, I would just say that with this gentrification that's going on in Harlem, it makes one sad to understand that we used to say that Harlem is the land of giants, and that, the land of Marcus Garvey launched this movement. And I like, Keisha Forrester from Straight Black Pride always mentions that that's where the Garvey movement started, and she's correct with that. And you think of Harlem now, just think of what Harlem produced, and I'm going to say something about the governor in a minute, but I'll just say that out of Harlem, that small little bit of turf that you can drive through in 5 minutes, produced the Secretary of State, Basil Patterson, Governor and Lieutenant Governor, David Patterson, New York State Controller, H. Carl McCall, Mayor, David Dinkins, Manhattan Borough President, Percy Sutton. Look how long ago this was. Congressman, Ways and Means, Charlie Rangel. Look at Harlem now. If you went away, you wouldn't even recognize it. All of those positions now are held by white people. Yet, going back 20, 30 years ago, we had those positions. I mean, there's not even a strong person even thinking about running for Manhattan Borough President now. Got whites. I mean, it's just sickening when you think of what we had and what we have now. Now, before you start thinking it's all our fault, no, it's not. This present governor has redrew the lines. In 2010, they redraw the lines every 10 years. Pataki did it. Cuomo has now done it. Spitz it. All of these guys, when the opportunity comes around every 10 years, they redraw the district lines to keep white people in power. They used to try to say we were 15%, then they went to 25% of the vote. I maintain all along the largest vote comes from us, black people in the city of New York. Well, they redraw the lines where we don't have congressional representation like we could have. We don't even have city council representation like we should, because the way they scientifically drew the lines, and they've done things in such a way to keep us out of power, and yet we have not challenged the governor with all these black people in the state legislature, assembly, and senate. We've allowed a white supremacist to dictate how many of us will be representing our communities and who won't, and that's unfortunate. We can have a further discussion later on how these lines are drawn, how they got Cynthia McKennedy out in Georgia, or how they do things right here systematically to keep our power base down, and that's a subject that we need to talk about more.
Right, yeah, gentrification is an issue. It's an attack. I don't even like that word. I like the land grab. Gentrification seems like a fluffy word, but that's what's happening all over the state, and that's why we should vehemently fight against gentrification. And if you look at the individuals that are gentrifying our communities throughout the country, but in particularly New York, these are so-called liberal whites, so-called progressive whites, the whites that participate in Occupy Wall Street March and sometimes participate in Black Lives Matter marches, yet they're grabbing land from African-American communities, forcing, our populations out. But I wanted to fast forward back to African-American history just to note some of the things that African people founded, not only astronomy, mathematics, medicine, language, architect. The papyrus was one of the first articles to write on using ink, the calendar. The Africans developed the calendar of 12 months, 30 days per month, and they added 5, later on. So the contributions of African Americans to history and things that affect us today is phenomenal, and it should get mentioned as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Noel, going back to an issue of today, Karina Burano, the rape and murder of the young lady in Howard Beach, there's been an arrest of a young man, Chanel Lewis.
Right.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, first, our condolences go out once again to the family of Miss Verano.
Absolutely.
The individuals involved in her murder and rape should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and placed under the jail if that is at all possible. But you know, this particular arrest, many people in our community in particular have raised some doubt on the credibility of the police officer's investigation. This is reminiscent of the Central Park case, and incidents of African Americans being arrested, falsely prosecuted, incarcerated for allegedly sexually abusing a European woman. You know, recently we talked about Emmett Till. You know, the woman after, you know, who was in her 80s came back and stated that she lied, that she made some of the strongest accusations against Emmett Till before he was murdered, that they're false. But some of the problems that I have with this particular arrest, first of all, the individuals don't fit the profile, and some people may not know that there's a serial sexual abuser in that area. You know, since 2011, I think there's been 6 sexual assaults on women or attempts on women in that particular park. But this individual don't fit the profile. His father said that he couldn't have done it. No, they claimed there was a condom found in the area. They didn't mention whether or not his DNA is on the condom. Police officers, I remember in the Central Park case, said that they had DNA. They put it out in the public. When the dust settled, after these individuals were convicted, we found there was no DNA. So there's you know, they said there was DNA on the phone, on her neck and under her fingernails. But time will tell whether or not the evidence was accurately gathered. I know they said he made a confession. I'd like to know how long did they interview him, you know, because as you see in the Central Park case, they interview sometimes these people for 18, 19 hours. And sometimes people make confessions out of exhaustion, out of intimidation. It is a known fact that people make false confessions for things, even murder. So what I'm saying is there's some reason for concern, and anyone who just doubts the concern of our community, you know, to say that our concern is not credible. I mean, I just get a rendition of some of the historical events that justifiably raise some doubt in some of our minds.
Mike, now, again, as Noel stated, and I have to reiterate, our condolences go out to the family. You know, it's unfortunate, and I'm sure, and I would believe that the family would want the person who is actually responsible for this heinous crime to be arrested, convicted, charged, and prosecuted and sentenced, but the correct person.
Exactly.
Mike, I know that as some of the questions and doubts and concerns that Noel have, that you may have some of the same concerns. Talk about some of the things that you find to be problematic in the way the arrest was made and the information that was disseminated to the community.
Well, I would just say from the outset, it seems that white folks use science when science is to their advantage. They threw out science, DNA, in the Central Park jogger case with Trish Mealy. They threw it out because it didn't coincide with the investigation. On the other hand, law enforcement agencies normally go ballistic when a white woman is abused in any way or killed. Now, in the Stewart case in Boston, there was a 70, 80-page confession, and it meant nothing because they beat the hell out of that man and made him confess to something that he didn't do. And only because of one detective who refused to let it go, even though his superior officers told him to let it go, did they find out that it was the husband that in fact did it and not Stewart. And then you could look at people like Susan Smith, whatever her name is, in South Carolina, how she said it was a black man who took her kids and killed her kids, and she had killed her own kids for a boyfriend. So I'm not swayed by that, and I'm not swayed by so-called facts in the case, because a true investigator that's looking for a true investigator, you don't look for facts, you look for evidence. The evidence will produce the facts, because a fact today is not a fact tomorrow. It's just a level of interpretation. But the remains, that's the evidence, and that's what you go by.
Oh, no, well, real quick, and we're going to go to our calls very shortly, our callers. As you view some of the information that was disseminated by the media, some of the things that you may have read via the newspaper articles, his mental capacity has been questioned as well. whether he was even mentally capable of giving a confession, whether he was mentally capable of even, and physically capable of even committing such a heinous act. What's your view on his mental capacity relative to the charges being brought against him?
Well, for all intents and purposes, what we've learned about the young man, him not having a violent past, him not even being engaged in any violent act according to his parents in the past, his passiveness, he had a passive attitude. I know he was beat upon not too long ago. The media, the white media, and the reason why I say the white media, because some people call it the mainstream, but it's the white media, is white focused, it's white owned, it's white financed, and their point of view is mainly white. They're claiming that he had an anti-woman mentality. I guess that's the justification, because when you look at a murder, you look for motive, you look for, so I imagine they're trying to subliminally suggest that he had an anti-woman mentality, but nothing that we hear from this young man agrees with that. So there's some problematic things. He was a very passive individual, according to his parents. Everybody who know him, everyone's surprised. Then that's not to say he can do it. But as Michael said, I want to see more. I want to hear more. This was allegedly a former police commissioner described this as a rape. I'm surprised there's not more DNA. They talk about something on her fingernails, something on her phone, and something on her neck. I'm surprised that we're not talking about more DNA if this was actually a rape occurring. So, time will tell.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to go to our callers now. First caller, welcome to Community Cap. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment.
My hotel, Brother Kareem from Harlem.
Okay, brother.
I just want to say this, brother. These people have been doing the same thing to our people. They're not going to change. It's going to be up to us to do for ourselves. Second of all, I would like to make the distinction that how President Trump is telling Christians that they can come into the country, but they're banning people of color from coming into the country. So that's a racist thing right there. And everybody in his administration is racist as far as his cabinet is concerned. We need to start teaching our children our history. That's very important, and we must demand that our history be put into these schools and colleges. Until we understand that, we're going to keep going through the same problems. Y'all better keep doing a good job, and bless y'all, brother. Peace.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for your call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment.
Good evening, gentlemen. Harlem calling. How you guys doing?
All right, brother. How you feeling?
All right.
All right, listen, you guys can't hear me. I can't hear you guys, but I'll just talk. Michael Graves was spilling out some names there a little while ago. My brother-in-law in the 70s was Councilman Fred Samuel of Harlem.
Okay.
Who used to hang out with Charlie Rangel and his crew.
Right.
So I don't know how great he was. I was a little bit too young back then and ripping and running, but that's another story for another show. Donald Trump, we got to realize, people, that first of all, Pastor Pretty Pimpin' Pastor Scott is what I call him. Is in it for his own agenda. He's trying to get the 45th agenda repealed, the Johnson repeal. So, he's in it for his own thing. And if you remember, when Donald Trump came to Chicago, he was shut down by Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter didn't have to raise a finger. Just their presence alone shut Donald Trump down to the point we had to cancel his rally. Now, that thing that Trump said about bringing in the feds to Chicago, that's a direct threat against our people. That's a direct threat. And it shouldn't happen that way. But Minister Farrakhan said, if we don't stop doing to what we do to each other, then Trump will bring in those feds who have no problem spilling black blood. And this is the way that Trump wants to deal with the inner city. I hope we are armed and ready to go, because we have the right to defend ourselves when we feel that we're being mistreated. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your call.
Yeah, just want to say real quickly that you're right. What you inferred about the Johnson Amendment, he might remove that where pastors now can openly support candidates and participate in elections. And the other thing you said about Harlem politics, look, the Gang of Four exists. I will probably get into that another time, but these were the very same people. That Harlem Gang of Four were the ones who went after Adam Clayton Powell, the greatest elected official we ever produced. So Harlem has a lot to be proud of, and Harlem has a lot of shame on its shoulders by being sold out by elected officials.
All right. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Next caller, you on the air? Yeah.
Comment.
Okay. Go ahead, next caller. Where you calling from?
Calling from Harlem.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment about the young man. Okay, I just want to make a comment about the young man out there in Howard Beach. Here we go again. Another young black brother being accused. The young brother, he looks like he has no clue as to what's going on. That perk walk, as they call bringing him out that precinct, he didn't look like he knew what was going on. So how could they possibly? And I honestly think he was being questioned without representation. That's still yet to be determined. And I just think Howard Beach is a racist borough as far as it comes to African American men. If the history states itself, it's been proven. So I just hope and pray that someone or some lawyer will come and help and defend this boy, because this young man did not commit this murder, and it's just a known fact. He did not do it. Mm-hmm. And I would just also like to say, rest in peace, Brother Ozzy. I'm a long-time viewer of this show, and I appreciate seeing three strong black men on television talking about Harlem and representing us in a proper way that you guys do. Right. And I love to see you guys on TV. I just wish y'all guys could just get on mainstream television. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from MNN, but try to get on mainstream television, and we can really get the word out, because y'all brothers are definitely the ones to do it. I appreciate y'all, and thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, brother. We appreciate it. And one of the things about a comment that you made, when you talk about someone not having the mental capacity to be able to freely give up their right to counsel and things like that, again, that young man didn't appear that he had that capability. So if he did not have, and I don't believe he did either, have a proper representation, then there's a problem with that interview and those questions and all the other evidence that was obtained.
And of course, no one can say dogmatically that he wasn't involved.
Right.
But, as it relates to representation, as Julian just stated, what the police officers do to get around that is when they pick somebody up from the street and bring them to the precinct, they tell them you're not under arrest. Because it's only when you're under arrest do they have to read you your remanded rights, that you have a right to an attorney. Yeah. So they'll let a person, come to the precinct with us. They'll try to encourage them, if not force them to come to the precinct. And then when they're there, they won't say you're under arrest. They might imply you have a right to leave, or they might not even say that. But you do have the right to leave if you're not under arrest. But if you try to leave, they'll stop you from leaving. So that's how they get around that, you have an absolutely right to have an attorney present. This happens all over the country. And the person could be in the precinct 14 years. And they may say they want to leave, but the police won't allow them to leave, but they won't say that you're under arrest. They don't say that the person is not under arrest. So, that's one of the ways that they get around that, his ultimate absolute right to have an attorney present when he's interviewed.
Right. Okay, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Go ahead, caller.
Brooklyn.
Okay, go ahead. Quick question or comment?
Yes, I'm saying the same thing like you said. I don't think the guy did it, I don't think he did it, because he don't look like a person that do something like that. You know what I'm saying? He looked like he ain't really got the nerve to do anything, So I don't know why they just be picking up people like that off the street, And like I say, what comes around, goes around. When something like that happened to him, they used to see a flood of cops down there. Oh, he didn't did it. They think of a billion reasons why they can't lock him up. You know what I'm saying? Especially if he's white. You know what I'm saying? That's a black kid. Oh, they got all the reasons in the world. They just make up shit. You know what I'm saying? Excuse my expression.
Well, brother, you do understand.
I hate it.
You're saying you don't understand.
And I wish you was on mainstream also.
Well, thank you. You're saying you don't understand it, but you do. We can go through a litany. We can go through a litany of massacres that occurred on a rumor innuendo. Just on the thought of a black man looking at a white woman, touching a white woman, making a remark to a white woman, have caused major massacres. So to pick up one person, let's not act like we don't understand. As I said, they go ballistic. They beat up so many people in Boston before they got to Stewart, harassed and snatched so many people off the street when one white woman they thought was killed until they found out later on, much later on, it was her husband. When that it's a clarion call that goes out when a white woman has been violated, and we all know that. So we shouldn't say we don't understand it, because we do.
And one of the things that, as Noel stated, we don't know emphatically whether he did it or not. I know I don't know, but we want a fair and impartial investigation. And I'm sure, as most people who are viewing this show and the family members and anyone who's familiar with this case, they want the person who is responsible for this heinous act to be charged, arrested, and convicted, and sentenced for this particular crime. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Next caller, you on the air?
Brother Ray, how you doing? Noel, Mike, how you doing? Julian?
All right, brother, how you doing?
Listen, there's only one person I know that will have been able to get him off. This young man who looks like he's lost in space, but the community never
Say the name.
rallied around.
Say the name.
Alton Maddox.
All
his
right.
license back.
Say it.
If Alton was out here, he would tear that case apart. He would tear it apart. But we won't rally around and let Alton get his license back, and that young boy is going to jail. Number two, all these blacks elected officials are running around here making us think that they are against Donald Trump. It's going to be showtime at the Apollo. This is going to be the biggest coon dance in history, where they're going to make us think they're against Donald Trump when they're actually with Donald Trump. Showtime at the Apollo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Yeah, where you calling from? Go ahead, caller.
So he's smooth.
Don't listen to your phone, brother.
Go
Listen
ahead.
to the TV.
Go ahead, caller. Go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Next caller.
All right. Hopefully we're able to get it back. Next caller, you on the air. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Go ahead.
They keeping him on there.
All right.
He ain't.
All right. For some reason, he can't hear us, so he doesn't know that he can go ahead. So we may have to go to the next caller. Hopefully, he'll call back.
Oh, Jose from Brooklyn.
Okay, go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
We might be having some
It seems like we're having some issues with our calls. It sounds like they can hear us. Excuse me, we can hear them, but they can't hear us. And until we rectify that, hopefully we'll be able to get that taken care of shortly.
Well,
You wanted to say something?
yeah, I'm just going to say, when the last caller said that black elected officials are not equipped, or they don't seem prepared to deal with Trump, why don't the black elected officials in New York deal with Andrew Cuomo? We talking about somebody all the way in Capitol Hill. Why don't we deal, former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, said all politics are local. Here we are allowing Andrew Cuomo. He has done nothing. All of these brutal murders, Eric Garner and others, have gone down. He's been silent. He's done absolutely nothing. He knows full well that he can try this case. He can have this case tried, have his attorney general go after those 8 police officers who killed Eric Garner. He's not doing nothing with that. And so it's just a farce for us to say Trump, Trump, Trump. Let's start with Cuomo. Let's challenge this current mayor, de Blasio, who said that if any legislation comes on his desk related to punitive action to a police officer for choking an individual, he said he will immediately veto it. So let's remind him he's running for office next year. Let's not let him hide behind his son this time and you get mesmerized by his son's afro, as opposed to looking at black people being killed outright and we talking about Trump, and here in New York State we not handling our business.
Right. See if we can get our next caller. Next caller on the air. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Next caller, you on the air?
Hello, Wells Flatbush.
Okay, yeah, quick question or comment.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead,
Flatbush,
caller.
hello?
Go ahead. All right, apparently we're having issues with our phones. They can't hear us, we can hear them.
Hello?
Go ahead, caller. All right.
Control room, just tell them to speak. Control room, just tell them to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead, Noel.
I wanted to say for those individuals who may not understand, and I don't really know how that may happen, but let's assume that there's individuals who may not understand some of the non-trust that we may have of the district attorney's office and police in regards to prosecution.
Okay,
Hold on, sister. Can you hear us, sister?
Just keep speaking it.
Okay, we're having a problem with our phone calls.
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, sister.
Namaste, brothers.
Namaste,
No.
go ahead.
Brooklyn, New York.
Go ahead.
Okay.
right.
We're having a problem
They
with the
can't hear
phones
us.
control room. Until y'all rectify that.
For the great job you are doing.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, phone.
And I would like to know, would you ever have a town hall meeting where we could get together the community?
We've had town hall meetings in the past, sister, and yes, we will have them.
Discuss these issues.
We've had them in the past. We'll definitely have them in the future, sister. Town hall meetings. So yes.
Right. Apparently, we're having issues with our phones. The audience or the callers cannot hear us, but we can hear them, and it's giving
Thank
us.
you.
Okay, you're very welcome. And we're having a slight problem. If the control room wants to tell the people that they can speak, then we can go about it that way. Other than that, it's going to be very problematic. But Noel, you had something you wanted to say?
Right, yeah, for those who may not understand why there's a lot of hesitancy to believe the police and the district attorney's office throughout the cities. I mean, the Brooklyn district attorney recently released dozens of inmates who were incorrectly prosecuted by the district attorney's office, his predecessor, Morgenthau. And some individuals have been in jail for over 10 years.
Hines.
I'm sorry, District Attorney Hines, a former Brooklyn district attorney. So there's a lot of reason, and a lot of it is justified why in our community we have a lot of mistrust for not only police but also the district attorney's office, and that mistrust is justified in far too many instances.
Okay.
How you doing? This is
Go ahead, caller.
caller from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're still having problems.
Okay.
We can't hear you guys.
All right, so just talk. All right, okay, unless the control room
Okay, I'm calling from Brooklyn, and I would like to talk about the Howard Beach incident. And what I don't think that the brother did it either. I think that out there in Howard Beach is a predominantly white area. That's where the Gottis are from. And I always had a suspicion that probably somebody in the family did it. And I'd like to ask you guys a question. What is this thing called familiar DNA? Something that's not allowed here in New York State, but they do it everywhere else. And probably that could be used to help, get this guy off. Because I agree with everybody else. He just does not seem to be, I just feel it. He doesn't seem to be the person that did it. And I don't think that we really hang out in that neck of the woods in Howard Beach. I mean, really, I know back in the day, I wouldn't be out there. You stick out like a sore thumb. But I'd like to hear your input on that.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your call, caller. One of the things that Mike mentioned earlier, he talked about evidence, and that's really what this case should be about. The evidence that may either convict the person who's responsible or exonerate someone who's not responsible for this heinous in this criminal act. So that's what we want to talk about. I don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to have my feelings get into it, because that's really not what this is about. This is about evidence that shows or proves who was responsible for this murder, and hopefully that it will be utilized to convict the person who is truly responsible. Mike, Noel?
Right, and me personally, I never go on the way somebody looks, because some people who have innocent baby faces, et cetera, has done some horrific acts. So it's not about a look. When I state my concerns about this particular case, they said initially our former police commissioner said it was a rape case. I know there's normally more DNA on a sexual abuse scene than just something on the fingernails, even though that can or cannot be credible. But like I said, the hesitancy of some of the concerns is in past experiences, especially in these high-profile cases when a white woman is allegedly raped, and don't let there be a black suspect, because then there seems to be an overly aggressive attempt by the district attorney's office and the police to get a conviction, irregardless of the evidence or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, you're innocent until proven guilty, and certainly I concur with what Brother Ray said. It would take the integrity of an Alton-Maddox to pursue justice in this case, because the average attorney, I'm not telling you a secret you don't know, will say you down the tubes and make it look like he's giving you the good fight in the courtroom, but really handing you over to the system. It happens every day when they tell you to cop out to things you didn't do. It happens every day when they fake like they're fighting, but they actually have a relationship with the other side, which is the prosecution. I saw that in the Diallo case. I saw that they really was not prosecuting the case, and you could not tell the defense from the prosecution in the Diallo case. And in this particular case, when they start talking about sketches, when they're sketching you an incomplete puzzle about scientific evidence, that mean they don't have much. Because if they had it, they would be profound and they would be strident in their position in terms of what they have. So the evidence is what you have. And when they found that inconsistency in the Central Park jogger case, they just prosecuted those young men anyway, not the Central Park 5, the Central Park 7. They prosecuted them anyway without scientific evidence and ignored the evidence they had on Mateus Reyes, who later confessed to it, and then had the nerve to question that. Those two detectives to this day question Mateus Reyes, yet his DNA was on her. So they use science to their convenience. When it doesn't fit their agenda, they will dismiss it immediately.
And I think that all anyone can ask for is fairness and justice and a accurate display of information that exists relative to cases like this. You know, if there is DNA that shows the responsible person, then okay, that's what we want. If we have legitimate information that determines that someone else is responsible or someone is responsible for it, that's what we want. And we want some fairness and justice and equity in a justice system that sometimes does not allow that.
And far too many oftentimes in our community doesn't allow that. So, I mean, we've had incidents where police officers have murdered individual on camera, but we see that the criminal justice from the department, from the district attorney's office to the police department, there's not a fair investigation. So our community has a right to be skeptical of the police department in this particular instances as well as others, because this criminal justice system in this country is dysfunctional. It works sometime when it should work all the time, and when it doesn't work far too often, it's because you have individuals.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is Eric Josie, 100 Black. You guys definitely have a phone problem, so I just want to say something briefly about this case. Unfortunately, I can't hear you respond to me. But you guys pretty much covered it very good. We talked before the show, and I definitely expressed, we all discussed how we felt about this case. I just want to say real quick that we have a historical backdrop about these kind of cases. So we're just not speaking on a whim. The people are very intelligent. You can see the person's face that he did not do it. Just an expression on his face and just a visual reaction. I'm personally deeply troubled, and I kind of think back to the Admiral Weema case, the case we got involved in when police officer Volpe was allegedly stuck a stick up sexually violated.
Okay. All right. It sounds like we lost you, Eric. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Eric, again, we apologize for the issues with our telephones. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to hear from you again, because the information that you and I had discussed, you had some very, very strong information concerning this particular case. Again, we're running out of time, so we're going to go to our panel. Noel?
All right. The Miseducation of the Negro is a good read for all of you. Little more, I love you. See you next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Peace.
Mike?
Let's never forget what happened to Diallo years ago, and let's stay on our game and challenge the people that should be challenged. Black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
And again, on Sunday, 11 a.m., Free Speech TV, Community Cop will be aired. Hopefully you guys will be able to contact us via Facebook. And you can actually watch the show, even if you have Free Speech TV and you don't have MNN, you can still watch the show on MNN.org. on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock every Tuesday. So watch us, give us a call. We'd like to thank Veronica Kidd, Nat Wood, Sheila Berry, Baby, and everybody in the control room that helps us navigate some of the issues that we go through technically while we're running the show. These guys are doing a phenomenal job, and we greatly appreciate the work that you do. Harper family, I love you. Leader family, Graves family, you guys keep watching. Our community cop family, we love you. Keep watching. Peace.